I want to thank everyone for joining us today and remind everyone to please, please, please subscribe to the channel. That keeps us going. My guest today is Blake. Hi, Blake.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm doing great. Tell me, how did you become interested in the whole Bigfoot cryptid phenomenon?
Well, I became interested first when I heard stories from my dad talking about the Patterson film. At a young age, there was old TV shows on History Channel, like In Search of. There was also stuff on the Sci-Fi Channel, I believe it's called Sightings or Sightings X. And so it was a plethora of ghosts, UFOs, ancient civilization, lost treasures, and of course Bigfoot. And Bigfoot is really what captured my attention most of all. And uh, that really what got me started. And of course, reading John Green's book over the years, and then finally going out in the woods more and more. I had my first encounter at 13, and ever since then, I've been really hooked and have been diving into this subject, going out in the woods ever since then.
Wow, 13, that's kind of a young age. Well, tell me in detail what happened. How did you come about seeing Bigfoot?
Well, of course, like I said, I read John Green's book and was able to be go on some property and stuff, and go out in the woods and enjoy wildlife and stuff. And um, there's a lot of things that happened on that property, and we're like what ifs and maybes, and we're not really sure of, well, is that something or not something, or the sounds we heard. But one particular evening, I kind of had a routine where I would go into the side woods of my property out in the country and adjust my eyes to the night. That way I could see better before moving on across the road to different areas and swamps. And so this particular night, I decided not to do that. I went across the road and paralleled it, but I was going to hit up this gravel pit and turn around, head into the harder woods and then the swamp. But when I was paralleling the road, I got about 20 yards and stuff. When I heard something, and I thought it was deer and stuff. I was just starting the night out, and I mean, I've jumped dozens of deer at that point and got chased by skunks and seen a plethora of different animals. So I thought it was a deer. I didn't really think nothing of it. I actually made a low whoop sound and continued walking another 20 yards, and I heard it again, and I thought it was deer again, just because that's just how it is and stuff, with ample amount of deer here in lower Michigan. And so I really just didn't think much of it. I made another low whoop. And this low whoop would only be heard in maybe a 200-yard radius. I'm not call blasting. I'm not trying to echo and stuff. No response and stuff. And I really didn't pay much attention. And I walked about 20 more steps. And then all of a sudden, I heard a burst of commotion coming down this embankment, which would have been in my side yard property. I heard what sounded like a bipedal thing cross the road in 3 steps. And then for a split second, there was nothing. And then a splash in the water, and it dashed towards me going, and it stopped 20 to 30 feet from me in this tall thicket. The moon was out bright enough. It might have been a half moon or full moon, but it was bright enough that I could see stuff, and the thickets moved a little bit. And I had a walking stick, and I raised it up like this, and I stood there for what seemed like forever. But after the first 30 seconds of panic and, oh my God, I'm going to die, this is this is the end. After 30 seconds, I was a lot more calmer. Nothing happened yet, and I kind of made some motions of like doing this, like I couldn't really see the creature and stuff, trying to give off some body language to it. And after about a minute and a half and stuff, I decided to put my stick down like this, and I decided, well, I gotta get back to my house. So I decided to turn. And I remember when I first turned, that was probably the scariest part, because and taking that first step and leaving, because being exposed and having your back towards the creature that's right there. I ended up walking up to the gravel pit and circled all the way around through the brush, thinking I would have a better chance to hear it than going on the road. And but I made it back to my house. My head was on a swivel. I didn't hear or see anything after that night. And then it took probably another 2 months of actually getting the courage of going back out there at nighttime and realizing that, nothing happened, although something could have happened. Nothing did happen. So that's kind of always encouraged me. And that's basically what really started me going to the woods a lot more than over the course of the last couple of years, been gathering evidence and showing evidence, have starting the YouTube channel and having many more encounters after that.
Well, let's look at this encounter a little bit closer because this is just fascinating. You're 13, you're out there, and this thing deliberately came down a hillside, crossed some water, and was coming toward you. Is that right? And
Yeah.
stopped?
So the next morning I went out there to try to find evidence and stuff. I didn't see no tracks. It took me 5 jumping steps to cross this dirt road where I heard it in 3. Once it came down just a little hill. I mean, we're talking maybe 8 to 10 feet of a hill ditch to the road. But it was a bipedal locomotion of stepping onto the roadway, and it was like everything slowed down. I could hear it, and when it jumped off the roadway, and it had cleared a branch that was about 3 to 4 feet up, about 3 to 4 feet out. So it jumped that and landed in a flooded thicket, and then dashed towards me.
What do you think its
Um,
intention was coming toward you?
I had been out there for the last couple of months and stuff, kind of doing the Bigfoot thing and just hanging out there. My mom actually had passed away, so a lot of times, I was just out in the woods just to get away from everything, and I would even cry in the woods sometimes, just being emotional at that age and stuff. And so I honestly think that it wanted to test and see what I would do. I'm not sure if it was a juvenile or an adult. It didn't seem like it was gigantic. So I tend to think it was a juvenile or a smaller one, about my size, maybe a little bigger, but it never came out of the thicket and stuff. And other incidences that happened on that property, I had stuff thrown at, vocalizations and stuff.
Well, how good of a look did you get at this?
I seen the thickets move, and it was
Yeah.
30 feet in the thicket, but you couldn't see anything.
Mhm.
But I distinctly heard it, and it dashed towards me very fast and stopped. It was all on 2 feet. It was bipedal. It wasn't a deer jumping. Like I said, I jumped dozens of deer, and they hop and they skip and they can make some interesting noise, but it was nothing like that. All the animals always run away from people. They're kind of ingrained in their nature that people are dangerous. So there's not many animals that actually will run towards a person, especially at nighttime. And at that time, there was not much, it wasn't known for like black bears going through there, cougars and mountain lions. Although some people would say now those big cats have moved down here unofficially, but at the time, wasn't no bear, wasn't no horse, wasn't another person out there. Um, just
So,
because at the
so the indicators were the way that this thing moved, the sounds it was making, the speed in which that it was going. So when it got into the thicket and it's moving around, did it at some point stop and just stand still then?
Yeah, it ran all the way towards me and stopped about 20 to 30 feet away in the thicket. But that's, the locomotion of it was and then stopped. And then it didn't move at all. But it was 20 to 30 feet in the thicket. And I just remember, staring at each other, basically. I mean, I couldn't see it, but it's, right there, this pitch black where this thickets was moving. And, we're staring at each other for 2 minutes. And I did feel like I was going to die at the time, but
Yeah, that would be really
the
scary, I would imagine.
yeah, yeah, like I said, it took 2 months before I got back enough courage to go out there because, well, I realized nothing happened. Any other time, every single time, nothing's happened enough to make me quit. I've never been attacked and harmed, but the locomotion of it crossing the roadway in 3 steps, where it took me 5 jumping steps, and also jumping over the branch like a hurdle, not physically possible for a person to do, I believe. And the speed of which everything happens, it was like that. It was super fast. Um,
So it was 2 months before you got back out there. So even if there were prints, they might not be there anymore. But how about where the brushy area where it was? Was there anything broken, anything that indicated something had been in that brush?
I had went out the next morning and looked at the area and didn't find any tracks, but I did, discover where it jumped over the branch and the pathway it basically took. Um, there was nothing there to show evidence. And, at the time I was a lot younger and stuff, not as focused as I am now, as looking for evidence, paying attention to detail, looking for hair and stuff like that. It was, more of like, oh, this is cool and, experiencing this stuff. But other than having like cheap phone and a cheap camera and trying to document stuff, which I didn't have at the time, it was nothing like it is now where you had a cell phone in your pocket, it's 4K and you can do all this stuff. So unfortunately, no, it was just a lot of that was a lot of stories and stuff that happened on that property and some other property close by where I heard vocalizations and prints and stuff. But
Sure. So you went out the next morning and looked where you thought that happened, but you said it was about 2 months before you got the courage to go back into the woods and
at
roam like you had
nighttime,
before. Yeah.
yeah, at nighttime especially, but like out in the deep woods in the swamp and stuff, I would still go out and kind of areas where I felt comfortable. But at nighttime, I wouldn't go out there until it was about 2 months and stuff. And the property was weird. There was ghost encounter stuff that happened. Me and my buddy seen what I described as the stick man creature. It looks like the rake, um, which is very creepy and stuff. Um, I don't know if that was
I've heard of this stick man before. Um, but tell me about it.
well at the time. So after the encounter, I tried to look and research, what it could be, and the only thing that there's only two videos at the time that came up, which was this fallen angel of Catalina, Spain video. It kind of looked like that creature, and then there was another very short clip of a creature, naked humanoid, crossing against a firelight. These teenage people who never seen it. My encounter, me and my buddy, so this was after the Bigfoot encounter, me and my buddy would go out in the woods, basically doing the Bigfoot stuff, but I wasn't really telling him that's what we were doing. We're just walking around, having fun in the woods at night. Again, we were going to go behind our barn into the cow pastures and stuff and adjust our eyes, and then we were going to move to a thicker chunk of woods. We actually get to the corner section of the fence, cross the fence, and it was bright enough that the moon was shining, and me and him are both looking kind of at this dead tree and stuff, and it just doesn't look right. And all of a sudden, me and him both see this bald-headed, tall, naked humanoid creature kind of stick its head out and look at us, and going like this, and then it went and kind of tree peaked and stuff. My friend's kind of freaking out. We're looking at it, and it tree peaks again and stuff, and we can see it's bald and it had like a yellowish tan kind of eyes to it and stuff. I don't think they were glowing, but I remember that being like a tan amberish color. And it came out again. This time you could see its arms and stuff, and its arms are very long and skinny. And my friend was freaking out at this point, so we actually went inside and told my dad. But I remember the wrist and the whole arm of the creature was the size of my wrist. And, at the time, I thought, well, if I had to fight this creature, me and my buddy could definitely take it on. I could, break its arms like a stick around my knee, and that's why I called it the stick man. Told my dad we seen this thing, this stick man out there. And my friend was pretty upset. My dad is old school, school of hard knocks, and was kind of drinking a beer and smoking a cigarette and kind of laughing and chuckled and thinking, oh, okay, sure. And so he went out there and looked, and he came back inside and said, there's nothing out there. So go upstairs, play some video games or something, and don't worry about it, which we did. But I always knew that I seen something. My buddy never came back to that house, actually. he never wanted to spend the night again. But a couple years ago, 5 years ago, my dad said, "You remember that night where we see that stick man thing?" And over the years, I would be adamant that yes, that thing was real. But he finally said, "Well, I'll tell you what really happened." And he told me that when he went out there, at first he didn't see nothing. He was kind of laughing, but then he seen the creature do the same thing, tree peeking, and it did it 3 times in a row, like it did with us. And the last time it really came out, and he said he got a good look at its arms, its hips, and its leg. And he would describe it as like a tall gray alien type of a humanoid form, a naked humanoid that's very tall and lengthy. And he took a swig of his beer, took a drag of his cigarette, he said, and then he said, huh. And he turned around and walked inside, and he was contemplating, what should he do? And his first thought was, well, I could grab the shotgun and go back out there and stuff. But he decided it was probably best just to tell us that nothing was out there, to don't worry about it, and just to go upstairs and stay in for the night. And the reason was, my mom had passed away. We had moved out to this piece of property, just a year before, and my brother was 5 years younger, and my dad would work in Detroit, so he wouldn't get home until 2 hours after we were off the bus. Come home, make dinner and stuff. But to have something, not only like the Bigfoot encounter was out there, which he was more open about believing in and all that, but to have this other thing out there, that was probably too much for the boys. And so he lied about it and stuff, and told us that it wasn't out there, don't worry about it and stuff like that. But
It's interesting. So did the two of you see it also kind of peeking around a tree as well? And
yes, me and my friend.
a film that I made back a couple of years ago called Bigfoot the Limits. They had an image cut on a trail cam of this thing, peeking around the edge of a tree. And it was really an interesting photo. It'd be interesting to know if what you saw was very similar to that. This looked like a small creature. Head was very unusual, almost insect-like, but it was definitely a face, peeking around the edge of that tree.
Yeah, my friend seen it. He was very freaked out. He never came back to that property. What I seen, I typically don't think it was a Sasquatch, just because how just skinny it was. If it was a Sasquatch, it was hairless, and it was as skinny as a skeleton would be, for that species. I mean, it had no meat on its bones. I mean, unless it was 100-year-old old Bigfoot that was, emaciated and about to die from being malnourished. I don't think it was that. I'm not sure what it was, but its depictions look more like a ghoul, a classic ghoul, or something like that of that nature. But
What's interesting,
I'm not really sure. A gray alien and stuff, kind of looked like that, but it didn't have like the classic gray alien head with the eyes and stuff. So, but the body and stuff was tall.
very same description as this photo and Bigfoot the Limits, but they also had Bigfoot activity, or at least evidence of Bigfoot activity. They had the howls and the sounds, and the commotion was, they'd come up to the house and they'd go back in the valley. You could hear the whoops and the howls and all of this, but they also had large footprints going through snow in their front yard, very long footsteps, And it appeared to be like probably an adult female with a child that was kind of swinging the child along, but beside it was odd. But it sounds like to me that this property may also have Bigfoot activity and then some other unusual creatures as well.
Yes, actually, not too long ago, about a year and a half ago, I actually was talking to a lady who actually lived down the road at the same time. And back in 2018, her mom recorded something in the yard, breaking branches and making some vocalizations and growling, which she did give me. And I think it's pretty genuine, actually, with the reactions that the witness on camera is giving. and you could hear the breaking of these pretty good sized branches, the growling, and this weird vocalization it does. This like kind of like a shuddering kind of a sound was right down the road from where I lived in my first encounter and stuff. And so that's kind of evidence that came out very recently that kind of collaborates things that have been going on in the area, but are still going on in that area.
Well, it is
Some
interesting that, a lot of areas, that there'll be multiple people, that see or hear things and are witness to certain things. What do you think it is about that property, perhaps, that these things migrate to or exist within?
there's nothing special about it other than it's just there's swamp in the area they can lay down and um, chill out for maybe a couple days, a week or 2 weeks. Like most of lower Michigan, there's not big swaths of land that they can actually hide from, like in Canada and Pacific Northwest. There's no mountains. There's a lot of private property, a lot of probably older people who don't go out in that property after dark. But a lot of it is just they're migrating to and from areas that I think they've always done for a couple of days, a week or 2 weeks, and then they will move on and circle around. And it seemed like every 2 weeks at that particular spot, they would be in the area, or you would hear something, and it would be like every 2 weeks for a couple of days, and then every 2 weeks for a couple of days. And so I think that's what they do in Lower Michigan, especially they're migrating around and hiding behind people's properties and stuff. And these are properties and stuff that they have watched for decades and probably generations of this particular farmer over in this section. They know when the season to plant his fields are, and they know the season where he's probably going to hunt. He's probably going to hunt at his favorite deer stand or his favorite tree or his favorite spot. Very predictable stuff. And watching homesteads develop. I mean, they've watched not only Michigan, but America develop from carriages and horses into automobiles and stuff. So they've only really had to adapt and find places where people typically don't go often. And if people don't think that there's a 1,000-pound Sasquatch that lives in their backyard or their back 40 acres, they're never really going to look or find sign, or really they're just oblivious to all of that. So it's kind of this kind of modern camouflage of, well, it doesn't even exist. Not in Michigan. It's in the Pacific Northwest. People aren't even looking or expecting. So it's actually able to blend in very, very easily. And of course, when they hear stuff, they chalk it up to, well, it's a deer, or it's people trespassing, or barefoot, or something that makes sense to them. Because a Sasquatch living in the backyard doesn't make sense to them, or traveling around their yard doesn't compute.
Exactly. So after that incident at 13 and thereafter, around that time frame, eventually you started researching it. Were there any other sightings or encounters that you had before you became a researcher?
Well, I mean, I started experiencing stuff right after that encounter, going to different properties, hearing stuff. But the couple years before I started the YouTube channel, I was on private property and had a couple things happen that I did record on an old iPhone that fell into water and lost all of that stuff. So that's why I started the YouTube channel, just to have a place to put it all and it wouldn't go away like it did. There was some subtle stuff that I heard when I was younger before that point of sounded like a pack of coyotes got torn in half by something, which was close enough to that property. But when I started to actually document stuff more, I was on this private property and I was out in the woods and stuff building a hunting blind and stuff. And I was actually staying at my girlfriend's property in her parents' house. And this one particular time, it was almost dinner time. And so I knew what time to come in and stuff. And I was expecting it. I heard a Bigfoot call, a classic whoop. And I'm like, oh, her parents are so funny, because they knew I was into it. It was kind of, they didn't believe and they're joking. And So I go inside and it's like, oh, hey, you guys call for me and stuff. And they're like, no. I'm like, you guys, I mean, come on, you guys were out there. You just made a Bigfoot call, right? I mean, it's dinner time, right? And they were like, no, we didn't make that call at all. And I was very surprised at that because I was sure it was even from the direction of where the house was that they had done that to call me. And they're not the type of people that would lie or had no stake in the game whatsoever. Um, Another time, I was doing the same thing. I hear what sounds like a 500-pound owl hooting. Ooh, ooh. It sounds like a humongous 500-pound fat owl that is stuck on the ground because it sounds like it's on the ground, 60 to 100 yards away from me behind some trees and stuff. And I go look, and there was nothing there. Skip a couple months, it was just winter. I was out practicing bushcraft and trying to make a fire with a magnesium stick and rod and matches, and having a hard time doing that. My hands are freezing and stuff, but I'm determined to make this fire, and it's on the property and stuff. And I just about have it lit. I start to have it almost going and stuff, and I hear this big old crack, crack, and then I look out and I see the silhouette of something running across. And I jump up and I'm kind of freaked out and stuff. And I already have a hunch of, what it probably is. And I stick to it. I get my fire going and stuff, and I stay out there all night. Nothing else happens. The next morning, I was able to look and find this big branch that it had snapped that was the size of my thigh, growing just a stump of a thing growing out of this tree, healthy, and snapped it like it was nothing, very fresh. Documented that on that phone, then the camera phone that got waterlogged. But the climax of that property was I was out hunting coyotes, and I shot a possum. That was too close. I actually missed the possum, but I heard the neighbor yelling at me, and I was like, what the heck's he yelling at me for? I mean, coyotes are a problem. Everyone has small pets and dogs, and he's yelling at me again as I'm walking up towards the house, and I'm just like, geez, what the heck is going on? I hear it. I hear him yell at me again, except for he's not speaking English, and it doesn't sound right. It's he's mumbling, yelling, and he yells again. But this time, I'm like, oh my god, that's not a person. And he's in between four houses on this country. If anyone else was standing or had a window open, they'd be hearing this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it can't be. And I hear him, and he's mumbling and he's getting closer. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And he yells again. He sounds like he crossed the road. All of a sudden, I hear a female going, and they're all of a sudden they're going back and forth, like a married couple bickering back and forth as they're coming along, paralleling where I'm at, the tree line, until they get right directly in parallel, right down the way in the tree line, 100 yards out. They stop, but they were bickering. And when they stopped, I'm kind of, freaking out at this point. I got a bolt action 223 rifle, and for the next 15 minutes, it's very quiet. And I hear a little creeping, a little snap of a twig here, and you feel this pressure. And that's kind of where I wigged out, went inside the house. And but the whole thing was, it wasn't an animal. These were like a person was yelling at me with an emotion. I knew he was mad at me. I knew he was upset, but he wasn't speaking English. And then the female was bickering at him. It was like, I had just bumped into him at a bar or something, and he was about to teach me a lesson. And his wife was like, no, Bob, don't do that, Bob. You're going to get in trouble, Bob. He has a gun, Bob. Just don't worry about it. It's okay. And they were back and forth. And then I got rigged out. I got scared when they went quiet, and I felt like they were close enough. Like, man, this is pretty intense. I don't want to be here anymore. So I went inside and went to sleep and stuff. And uh, so
So
that
you've
was
heard
probably
that
that
you've
was my most dangerous moment where I actually thought like, oh man, something bad could happen because
yeah,
I was getting yelled at.
right, exactly. You've probably heard the Sierra Sounds. That was a very similar thing that happened in the Sierra Sounds where the it was pretty loud and went on for a rather long span of time, but those were just really interesting sounds. So you didn't see anything here. It was just the sound. You just heard them in the dis
A clear understanding that it was not an animal, but it was a dude yelling at me, and he wasn't speaking English. It sounded like a caveman mumbling. And then when this female, she was doing what I describe as like this sing song talk, this kind of bird fluttering, fluty sounds, very rapid, like when they were talking like the samurai chatter stuff. It was very like feminine. You could tell a female. You could tell it was a male. I could feel the emotion and stuff. And this wasn't animal communication. It was definitely like a people in a language that I didn't speak, whether it be some caveman mumbling and stuff. But it was definitely emotional and stuff. Like I said, it was like a husband and wife bickering and stuff. That's how I felt and stuff. It's like very humanistic emotions that you could feel and pick up on, even though you didn't understand it. And that was the most intense where I felt like, man, I could be in trouble. Even though I've had other stuff, I had rocks and boulders thrown at me, not at me, but close by. That's where I felt like, they're really pissed off. This guy's mad. He's coming right at me. He's not caring. He doesn't care at all. And there's a female trying to stop him. I'm like, oh man. I tried to stay out there as much as I could, but I really did not feel comfortable when they were almost close enough that I felt like, they could grab me too fast before I could react.
Did you go back out there in daylight and see if you could see any tracks or anything?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I lived on that property for another year or so, and um, always felt there was something out there, but never could find any tracks and stuff. But that's kind of how Michigan is for being in the woods in general. A lot of the foliage and leaves will cover up the stuff, and unfortunately, you could spend a whole day, picking up leaves and trying to figure out and find tracks and stuff. And at the time and stuff, I didn't have that much time dedicated and stuff. Plus, being on the property, doing other things. But I always felt that they had, there was a power line and stuff that went through there, and that property had been owned by the same people for generations, couple generations. So I felt like, they were always there watching the family grow and watching the kids grow up and have fun and ride the ATVs and all the sorts of stuff. And the family never knew anything better. So why would they think a Bigfoot was out there? Then of course, I'm out there, I have all this stuff happen, and they're like, yeah, yeah, right. And stuff, because they lived there, for years, 40 years and stuff, and that's why I really think it's this modern camouflage Sasquatch have in urban areas like lower Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, some of these other states where it's like, how could there be a Bigfoot that's traversing through these urban, suburban, and outskirt areas and over highways or under highways? And to a lot of people, it makes no sense. But from my experience, it really does seem like it's actually not that hard. Everyone's in bed, flipping on the TV, shutting the lights off at 10. And I mean, after they let their dogs back in, they're not going outside for any real reason. And they definitely don't leave their backyard and the light that's in the backyard. So everything else can just squeeze through like a little maze and avoiding the lights and avoiding people enough. So
Exactly. Yeah, that's absolutely right. So you started doing more research along the way, it sounds like. And what about structures? A lot of people see those, arched poles, that are, clipped down. People see little huts, and I've had domes. I mean, all kind nests, all kinds of structures that have been built up. Have you seen anything like that?
yeah, and that particular property, when I really started noticing like manipulation of the environment, where you know, trees and sticks and stuff, they fall and stuff, but some of the stuff was obviously manipulated in a way where it's like, I'm pretty sure that wasn't like that just the other day. And we had no storm that came through. It wasn't windy. But over the last recent couple of years, we've documented some very strange tree structures, and I've been in areas where you're going there every single day, and all of a sudden there's this new tree structure right here, or there's this broken pine branch that's woven in between all this maple manipulation of a tree structure. But when you look around, there's no pine branch, there's no pine trees for anywhere for a 200-yard radius. There's no pine trees and stuff. So this was placed here on a trail, almost for me to notice. In that particular area, had several wood knocks and stuff happen, and being followed, rocks being thrown. Actually, that's when I first started being able to capture wood knocks and have them on the YouTube channel and document it, and found what I considered a nesting area with all these different tree structures in a log, a down tree that got stuffed up and put into a crotch of another tree, with the butt end of it was actually placed up into the tree, into the crotch of the other tree. And a lot of fascinating stuff. Of course, starting the YouTube channel and having other people to go out with, we had very good close encounters and several frightening experiences over the years and different places around Michigan.
What year did you
So
start your channel?
I believe it was December of 2018.
Oh, you've had it up a while, yeah. So
Yeah, I
what,
had it up in a while, a little bit, and
yeah.
um,
So what kind of experiences have you had out there since then?
um, well, we went to on my channel. There's the Waterloo expedition. It's a little older, but there was a lot of activity that happened in this historical area that sightings have occurred. The BFRO has a couple of sightings in the area. We went there and had several things happen. Like a storm was rolling through, tornadoes actually went over us, luckily, but it was storming, thunder, raining, heavy rain, and what I heard was a drumming sound, bup, 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 bup. After hearing it a couple times, bup, 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 I'm looking over and it's raining, and I see a guy, rummaging around in his car, getting set up for the night, and there's other people in their cars, and everyone's spread out, and I'm hearing this bup, 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 and it's a rhythm of five, 5 beats. I don't pay attention much really to it. I'm thinking it's Pearson. I go to sleep. I wake up to a text. I wake up and check my phone, and I have a text message about 30 minutes after I go to sleep of my buddy saying, "Do you hear that drumming sound?" And except for he is nowhere near me. He's actually up on this hill, probably 50 yards away from us, hearing the drumming sound behind his car. But the drumming sound was behind my car on this other side of the area where we were camping at. And he heard the drumming sound too. There was other people who said there was someone walking and running around during the nighttime when it was raining around the cars, and they just thought it was someone going back and forth to their tent for some reason. But they heard one particular time the thud of it stopping past them, and it was a heavy thud sound. When we tried to replicate it, of course, it didn't happen. As someone was leaving, when we all scattered to the tents, when it started scattering to the cars, and some people tried to rough it out in the tents, and they got flooded. And so some people decided to leave after some people were in cars already. And when they turned their headlights on, they seen what they described was, well, I thought it was just one of you guys out there, and you guys, it ducked and was hiding away from the lights, and then started to run away as the car lights were trying to turn and take off. And he thought that was weird. The next night, it was a lot better weather. We did hear some sounds and stuff that was not able to be recorded. Found a footprint that we casted. It was kind of a a heel and stuff that kind of like dug into like this. So it kind of like smushed and collapsed into like a mole hole. And we casted that. And then at the very end of the night, I actually have this recorded. It's in that documentary, the Waterloo expedition. You hear me going to sleep. I'm on my phone, and then I pass out and I'm sleeping. You can hear me sleeping. You hear this small tree just get pushed over, and I kind of roll over and kind of groggle a little bit, but I stay asleep, and that was able to be recorded, and um, all happened in that same camping spot, same area within the 2 days. So that was pretty interesting. And there's multiple people to witness it and experience stuff too, which makes it, I think, even more valid.
Yeah,
Um,
it always helps when you have other people that can validate and also compare, what you did hear and see and such. That's always good. So what do you think Bigfoot is?
so that's the tough question to answer, really. I'm not really sure. Could be a couple different things, but I try to stay on the flesh and blood side of things. That they're probably a North American great ape, although I'm very fascinated by Native American history, who refer to them more as a people, depending on the culture and the tribe. There's lots of different descriptions and good and bad behaviors associated with them. A lot of them say that they're just a people, a different tribe of people. Some of them are an elder brother. Some of them are spirit guardians of the forest. A lot of the Native Americans say at one point in time, there was communication and trade, depending on the tribe. Not all of them. When you say Bigfoot's in every North American tribe's legends and stuff, that's actually not necessarily true. There are dozens and dozens of entities that are very similar in description or have different descriptions that could be filled into that Bigfoot void, but not necessarily um, are flesh and blood and have special powers and giant metal noses that can stick out and kill you and stuff. Not necessarily considered a Bigfoot. 200-foot giant woman who has a basket to put you in and kidnap you. Not necessarily a Bigfoot, but some of the names get associated with Bigfoot. But I think and it comes down to it. Either it's a flesh and blood normal animal, it's a type of hominin relic ancestor of the human bush, not necessarily an ape, what we would consider more of the ape animal side, but a human side, or it's a spiritual, and there's some of this spiritual stuff that we see with UFOs and ghosts and stuff like that is kind of the same umbrella veil. I have not determined what it is yet, and so I can't really say. I always try to stay on the flesh and blood side, but I have experienced all this other stuff, and so I'm always
I think
open
I
minded.
think when I think a lot of people experience it in different ways, and it may just depend on the person, what their capability is and what they can perceive, it seems like. But there's two camps. There's the flesh and blood camp, and there's kind of the paranormal camp, with Bigfoot, and it seems to cross over. So it's really hard to say. But you mentioned
Yeah,
UFOs. Have you ever seen a UFO when you're out there looking for Bigfoot?
yeah. Actually, I've seen a couple UFOs over the years. Actually, but I've actually filmed a UFO um, close to it, right over the area where there was Sasquatch activity. It's actually on the my YouTube channel. It's a Michigan UFO encounter or sighting and stuff. It's a couple of years old, but you see this UFO, this light. It's not flashing, flying, and then all of a sudden you see a plane come into the picture, and the plane is blinking. It's legally supposed to and stuff, and they cross paths, and eventually the UFO goes behind this tree line and stuff, and you can't see it. But that UFO, you can definitely tell it's not a normal aircraft, that it's not blinking lights at all. It's not legally doing all that. And so I was able to actually film that and capture that. But I have seen UFOs over the years, when I was 5 years old. I remember looking up the sky and seeing a cigar shaped multi uh, window paneled UFO that was different colors and stuff go in between different clouds before losing it. Um, I remember with my friends actually seen this too, a triangle shaped UFO with three lights that actually flew 50 feet above the house in town. And then my dad came back from the store. He's seen it and stuff. We all seen it. It was flying over the town itself. And then that particular one that I did film in a Sasquatch area. So, but Sasquatch is my main thing. So I try to go out there and do sort of that stuff. And we've been all over Michigan, up north. We actually have quite a few more intense encounters to talk about if we have time and stuff. And
absolutely. Tell us about.
And then I don't know if you've seen the Monroe Bigfoot sighting that just happened in May, but I actually went out there on Thursday and found potential evidence that collaborates the witness's story on that. So I guess we'll kind of speed run things. I'm not sure how much time you have or allowed and stuff.
Yeah, just I have it all the time in the world, but you might not have as much time as I do. So
I got some time.
Yeah, just tell us about it. Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
I started the YouTube up, started having a bigger group, getting more people. We've downsized dramatically now because bigger groups, there's drama and different stuff that happens, and unfortunately, but at the one time we had a pretty big group of people going to different areas and experiencing stuff. We actually ended up going to be part of the Florida's 168 expedition with Bigfoot Odyssey and the late Carrie Arnold. I don't know if you recognize the name, but I'm sure some of the listeners would recognize that about 5 years ago. Bigfoot Odyssey was a pretty good interview channel and stuff, and they were having an expedition in Florida for a week-long expedition and constant filming and stuff. So I was a part of that. We took some members from Michigan down there, and we actually did have quite a few things actually happen. Stuff that was on the documentary and stuff that didn't make to the documentary that was going to be on number 2. It unfortunately has never come out. There was a ex-federal agent with us who was part of our group who went down there and got super sick, possibly infrasound, got super dizzy and had to be basically almost carried out and stuff, while another member at the same time was seeing red eye shine, and we were hearing stuff all around us. I wasn't sure what exactly was going on. Everyone's seeing stuff, and we had a member being sick, so I just decided we had to go back to camp just to be safe. The next day, there was a bunch of stuff that happened. There's a lot of people there. But we ended up going to different places and hearing this gigantic growling sound following something that other people had seen in that area before we came there. But the climax pretty much from our part was we went to this spot where it was really freaky. The researchers that have researched it feel very uncomfortable, very scary. And we went out there. I was with Christopher Noel. We started hearing what sounded like, I was like, well, that could be like a bullfrog, that like groaning sound, but we weren't quite sure. And we kind of heard something kind of moving around, and we had apples. So we were trying to stick my hand in different bushes, trying to give them the apples and stuff. We met up with the other researchers on this 4-way trail, and they were telling us about the stuff that they heard, and something happened. And this skeptic who just showed up that day, he's kind of skeptical, had a cop flashlight with a taser on it, smacked out of his hands and tumbled and broke when it landed. And they were hearing stuff all around, but that is what really freaked them out. And they met with us. We were telling them what happened with us, but it was kind of like, yeah, maybe, but not definitive. They grouped together, and I'm talking to my buddy from Michigan, And they go in the woods in front of us, and we're just watching and stuff, and he's just talking and stuff to me, and I have the camera, the nice Sony 4K camera, and I'm looking just down this trail, and all of a sudden I turn behind me and I see this creature spider walk or crawl out across the trail, and it crawled, and then it looked like this, and I could see its humanoid head like this snap at me, realize I was looking at it, and then it continued to grow forward through these cattails and went directly towards the other group of researchers. And I'm on the walkie-talkie saying, I just seen it. It's going right to you guys. It's right there. And they're responding back to me as, yeah, we hear something, but we don't see anything. We don't see anything. And, they thought, well, maybe it was a pig and stuff, because they walked around. And I'm like, no, it walked right to you guys, and it's right there. They didn't see anything, hear anything. That was filmed. Unfortunately, it's a 10-second clip on a 4.5 hour actual video clip. And so when the first documentary came out, that the person editing it and stuff didn't find it and didn't put it out yet, but that was filmed. And then the next night we went to a different spot, and I actually filmed, and it's on my YouTube, red eye shine. And this was in the documentary. We walked up to it, and there's this big red eye shine on this colored night vision. And this is after we heard stuff walking around us. This guy got followed, and I tell my buddies, we go up to it, and I go like this because I'm pretty sure the light, the red eye, is reacting to my IR light that is sweeping on it. Because every time I would sweep it and stuff, it looked like the creature was moving every time this invisible IR light was actually shining onto it. And so that was pretty intense and stuff. We went to Florida. And then after we came back from that, we went out to Western Michigan and had several different stuff happen. A researcher who was in Florida with me, we had activity. We chased after these things. I heard it jump down this embankment and crash down through the debris and go down this embankment and towards the creek. We were walking back. He looks behind him. He sees one that's standing on the trail, walk off the trail. We had a thermal there, and we chased after these things, and you see us running through the woods. You don't see anything on thermal. The next night, we're out there, just me and that other researcher. There's other people scattered around. We're down in the creek bottoms and stuff, and we're hearing stuff. The other researchers at camp are blaring this radio music. We're kind of like frustrated that that's happening. We're trying to text him and say, shut it off. He finally shuts it off. But we're hearing stuff around us. And then a hissing sound, this popping sound. And this is recorded. This is actually on the channel too. And at one point, we heard this humongous splash. Boosh! And it sounded like a bowling ball sized rock got thrown into this creek, just from like it landed like it was directly down, just boosh, big cannonball splash. Caught on audio. He's freaking out. Oh my God, did you just hear that? And I'm trying to calm him down, and because we're in this like little island in the creek. We have waders on and muck boots. So we're crossing over water and going places where people don't go. Mud's up to our knees. We hear that big splash, boosh, and we hear stuff moving around before this and hissed at and stuff. And, he's freaking out and stuff. And like, we got to go back and go meet up the other people and tell them what happened. And they're telling us, yeah, the reason why I shut the music off is because this chunk of wood just got thrown at the back of the windshield and freaked us out. And I turned it off, and I looked, and there was this creature standing behind this bush with its head above the bush looking at me. And then it ducked down and walked away. This was happening at the same time where we were hearing stuff and rock, that big rock got thrown at us. And this, if that bowling ball sized rock would have smashed us, it would have been dead. I mean, you're not surviving it. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, if they really wanted to hurt me or hurt us, they could. If we're blind out there, we're not going to see this rock being thrown however far away it was, because it didn't sound like it was thrown close by. Like it chucked it up in the air and then it fell down. And so these things could take you out and go bowling and knock you over like a couple of pins. As much as intense as that situation was, I didn't feel endangered, like being yelled at with that creature coming down after me and being yelled, with the female. This situation, I just felt like it was a warning, like, okay, enough's enough kind of a thing, which I'm totally fine with and listen to so we can get out of the area. But that was pretty intense and stuff. That was documented, and that is the expedition to Allegan, part 1 and part 2. So part 1 is like the first night and stuff that happened, and then part 2 is the second night with the rock being thrown, the hissing, and some of the other audio and stuff. And then we have daytime stuff. We actually looked for tracks, and it's pretty interesting. There's a couple trips up north that we had stuff happen. Really quick, I seen an orb. It was about a volleyball sized white, kind of a fog color, like if like you're underwater and you see those white lights or a light underneath of a fog rolling by. It was that color. And we're in this area where a purported Bigfoot sighting of a female that was seen around this property often. And we actually had gone and looked, and we're hearing whistles that was recorded by my buddy. And we had split off, and they heard rock clacking down where they were at, and I didn't hear nothing. And I circled back and I waited for them, and they're telling me, yeah, we heard this rock clacking down there. And we're like, okay, well, let's meet up with the other guys because they went scouting somewhere else. And as we're walking down the trail to meet up with the big group, they're texting us like, oh, we're hearing stuff. There's something going on. You guys need to get over here. And I'm glancing towards the left, and I see what looks like the silhouette of a Bigfoot hurry up and run behind a tree. But it was just like a window, looking through a window of a hole. And then I stop and I walk back, and I'm walking back and forth, and I'm told my buddy, I think I just seen one. And so I start filming, and I told him to go run over there, and he runs right over there, and there's nothing that moves. There's nothing that walks around. And, but I was very adamant that I seen a very quick glimpse of something running behind a tree. Unfortunately, they were blowing up our phone and yelling at us at this point because they were pretty close. Get the F over here. There's something over here messing with us. You need to get over here now. And reluctantly, we did and stuff, and figured, well, if there's something here, there's something over there. There'd probably be more stuff. Let's just go over there instead of trying to explain through a text and yelling. And so they had heard stuff. We had documented a potential track that was in moss. The next night and stuff, we had, and other people had seen an orb the night before I arrived. They described it as a Chinese lantern-sized orb that flew up above the fire, 30 to 40 feet, 50 feet above the campfire, and zipped around and then flew away. We did record the next night something by camp, vocalization that was caught. We went to the swamp. We actually did find a hare that has been lost, unfortunately, but we recorded vocalizations from the swamp and stuff that night. And then, skipping a couple things, we actually had a Michigan Bigfoot conference in 2020 and had Jason Kenzie from Searching for Sasquatch documentaries on Tubi come down, and we actually went up north with them for a week-long expedition. We had the Sea Squatchers, Jason Kenzie, We had Adam Davies there. We had Robert Kreider. I'm trying to remember, and then Gwendolyn, independent researcher and stuff. But we actually went there and had some tracks and different stuff happen, some ghost encounter, weird stuff that actually happened to Adam Davies and Gwendolyn and stuff that I was able to record. And we actually did capture vocalizations at nighttime when we moved our camp from next to the cabin in the woods next to the cabin property out into the middle of nowhere. Halfway through the expedition, we started to get in vocalizations during the daytime. People are hearing stuff, and at nighttime, a really good one actually that was recorded on several different recorders in a parabolic dish setup that Robert Kreider sells. Fascinating stuff. And then the second to last night, I had a recorder going about a mile or two down, mile and a half down the trail in a spot where only I knew. I put it out there by myself, and I asked, "All right, who's going out there with me?" And it's about midnight. Maybe it was a little after that. Anyways, the only hand that shot up was Jason Kenzie's. He hand popped up, and I said, "All right, let's get our stuff. Let's get going." Which was probably the best person to have because he had the best quality camera to take. Besides, we had a couple thermals that didn't record. Unfortunately, they were having a software issue. But so me and him, we go all the way to the recorder and stuff, and we walked this trail, didn't see nothing, didn't hear nothing. But we get up to this certain point where there's all these pine trees and stuff, and this particular one looked like it had been pushed over and had blocked this section and stuff, and went under and stuff. And I recorded and explained it. It's in his documentary. We get the recorder, change the batteries out. That way, it's going to record all night. My headlamp, it's a red, nice coyote hunting headlamp, dies, and so he gives me his kind of cheap white light headlamp that it works. It's just you're not able to see as great a distance as my other one, which was a couple 100 yards with that one. We get down to walking back to the trail towards camp, where we see these 3 broken limbs, twig limbs, but they're dangling right in front of our face. Where we're gonna run right into them, and this wasn't there before. This wasn't there when we just walked the exact same way. And I'm talking to him, and we're kind of explaining, well, this could be this tree manipulation and stuff. And we walk just a couple steps after being there for a minute, and all of a sudden we hear this burst of commotion behind us, like something like scooped the ground or just like rustled the ground like on purpose a little bit. And we both turned around. I unshouldered my rifle and pointed it towards the direction, towards the ground, but towards the direction, because I'm thinking, well, it could be a bear, could be some wolves, big cat, because we've seen tracks of all of those things up there in this particular area. So I'm thinking, oh, it's one of those. I'm getting ready. But instinctively, I hear the scattering of what I instinctively think, oh, that's Bigfoot. That sounds like Bigfoot to me. Every time I've heard that, that's what it's been. So I actually shouldered my rifle. And then moments after that, we see this individual tree peak and looking at us, and he's about 3 feet off the ground. And Jason starts rolling that camera, and his camera is rolling. It's rolling in 4K. Except for his camera, his IR and stuff is not picking up the eye shine. Me and him could physically see this eye shine, but the camera is not picking it up. And he says that, and we're looking at it, and I'm looking around because I hear something creeping around, but we're focusing like this, and I'm thinking, well, it could be a raccoon, it could be a bear, and then shortly after that, the second individual, about 7 to 8 feet above it, looks tree peaks and stuff. And he's filming. He's like, "Do you see that? There's another one." And I'm looking at it. I'm looking down. I'm looking over here. I'm listening because I know I'm hearing something walk over here. And I actually say it on camera. I think there's three of them because there's one right here around us. And I'm looking at it, and me and him have both seen it. We're pointing at him, and this is happening pretty fast. But I'm thinking, it could still be a raccoon. It could still be a bear on the side of a tree. A family of raccoons on the side of the tree. It was when the individual on the bottom, who was about 3 feet off the ground, went like this, and I seen his entire silhouette of his head. I seen where it went up to his forehead, and then it extended up to where the crown or the crest, what we would describe, where its forehead went here to here like normal, and then there was a second big forehead up to its crest. And it instantly, I was like, that's not a wolf, that's not a bear, that's not anything that I'm thinking that it was. And we ended up walking over there after Jason kind of stumbles into a tree and kind of scares himself and like jerks and stuff. I kind of put my hands up in between us and laugh to try to calm the situation down. My experience is, I don't think they speak English, but they're going to know emotion. They're going to know body language, and they're going to know, they're going to understand certain situations. And so I put my hands up and laughed. I said, everything's okay. And before we walked over there, we walked over there, and I started like saying Native American greetings to them, and kind of singing it, singing hello, and singing hello to how are you to them. And Jason starts just going la 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 la, but we're trying to sing it to present ourselves as non-threatening, calm, and like as much as I could. That's the only thing I could think of, to sound like we're singing and being calming to them. And we walked right up to where they stood. They had scattered, but right there at both sides is an area, a big tunnel where something big could go through there and hide in these taller, denser trees and stuff without making much noise. We're standing there and we're talking, and I literally turn and look right, like I'm looking right at you. I don't see nothing, and I turn. Jason turns his camera on himself, and he turns a little bit, and right where I just looked is a big, massive single eye shine right there. And me and him don't see it with our naked eyeball, but the camera is picking it up. And then he swings back around, and we're talking, and we decide to walk back. And then I kind of make mention of, well, these tree branches right here, I think they just did it. I think they did it for us. And Jason throws the camera back, and you see that as we're walking away from where we just stood, where the creature stood, you see this big eye shine in the distance where it was standing as we're getting farther away from it. We talked about the branches that were manipulated, and Jason is like looking down the trail, and he's like kind of looks like that, and then he looks back at me and says something, and then all of a sudden he looks back, and the camera's on himself, and he sees something. And at first you can see him. He takes a second look, and he starts to freak out. Oh my God, there's one that was right there. It crawled across the trail, and he was filming himself, which was great because you see his true reaction. Unfortunately, he didn't have the camera facing the creature, but there was the third creature that was standing there. He said it was standing up, and then it dropped down all fours, and like it spider crawled. It crawled across the trail. And I'm asking him, how far away was it? How big was it? Where did it go? And, he's telling me, and he's telling me it went over there, and I'm looking, and I have my camera, not as good of a camera, and we don't see anything. And I'm like, but it should be right there. How come we're not hearing it? And, it's a pretty intense situation. Typically Sasquatch don't announce themselves. They don't let them be seen and let them be seen for a little while. I told Jason, we got to go back to camp because there's more people there. There's more equipment. There's more stuff to record stuff on. There's audio. There's thermal. There's at least one thermal camera that does record. So we got to go back to camp to try to get these things to follow us to get evidence. And so, we walk back to camp and tell everyone what's happening. And shortly after that, we're all talking and stuff. And one of the members was like, "Hey, there's something standing behind you." And he has a thermal, the one that doesn't record. And he said that he seen on the thermal there was a person standing over there, a tall one, back behind where I was camped at and stuff, back behind us, all just watching us. And he said it almost looked like it noticed me watching it, and then it walked backwards, standing up, and went backwards, straight as could be, ducked down, and was gone. But very adamant that it wasn't one of any of us, because as soon as he said, "Oh my God, it's gone," and stuff, we kind of all perked up and went walking around and didn't see nothing and didn't hear nothing. But so that was up north. That was with Jason Kenzie. I believe that is Searching for Sasquatch number 3, part 3, part 1 and part 2, or it was a 2-parter. Then we just kept going out, kept doing stuff, kept getting stuff. I got a more recent one from last year of 3 dozen tree knocks that happened. And on there, I was in a particular spot with sightings over the years, and I'm in this chunk of woods, and I hear this distinctive knock and a vocalization that's coming from across the field in this other chunk of woods. So I make my way over there, and I stay on the outside of the woods in that field listening and stuff. And I stay out there for an hour or two, and I make my way back to my car. I'm going to sleep out there, put my auto recorder out, and then discover when I check it that 30 minutes after I shut my car door, the first knock started to happen. And over the course of 2.5 hours, there were 3 dozen knocks that happened. And some are a double knock, knock, knock. Some of them are triple knocks, knock, knock, knock. Varying degrees of sound and like power and stuff. Some sound a little closer than others. But for the next 2.5 hours, there were 3 dozen knocks that happened that was recorded and put on the YouTube. And so, that's it's pretty impressive stuff in an area where we've had different weird stuff happen. And there was actually an encounter by a law enforcement officer out there.
Michigan does seem to have quite a few sightings. I mean, I've interviewed several people from up that direction, and it does seem like they have just have a lot of activity that way.
Yeah, the BFRO has like 220 reports in Michigan, but my buddy Val Zavala, I'm not sure if you know him. I'll definitely a good person you want to interview. His own research, he's a data miner, so he doesn't Bigfoot research, but he researches the sightings and categorizes them the same way and stuff as like a serial killer and stuff. So he is in Michigan. It keeps going up, but he said that there are 2,400 reports in Michigan that he has categorized. So it's a big jump from the 220 that the BFRO has listed. And his research shows pretty much the same tenfold increase among all the other states compared to what the BFRO shows. With Oregon and Florida still being higher, but Michigan being is still in the top 10 of hotspots.
Yeah, and in part, some of the areas may have more reports because there's still a lot more people that are nature lovers and they're out and about and they happen to run into these things. And so, some areas maybe it just doesn't have that much in the way of outdoors people.
Oh yeah, true. And Val's reports and stuff, there are sightings in every single county of Michigan. Even in Detroit or the small little town of Monroe, Michigan, which we just had a Bigfoot encounter that was posted on the BFRO Matt Moneymaker posted it on Facebook, calling attention that the sighting happened in the city limits of Monroe, in this marshy area with historical sightings that go back to the 1960s. The 1965 Monroe monster incidents were a couple of different Bigfoot sightings called the Monroe monster happened in that area. And so I told my buddy Val that, and I think he told some other people, but it had rained the next 2 days, and uh, just about how luck turns out, I was able to get out there on Thursday unexpectedly and go and try to figure out and document some of the things, if anything, that was out there. And I actually did find the spot where the witnesses described the creature going up the embankment and disappearing. I actually did find two tracks right there with disturbed area going up the embankment like they described, and on the other side, a disturbed area going down the embankment with some broken plants, a rock slide impression that with some depth to it. You know, if you like go down and kind of slide on the rocks and it kind of makes that little depression, that was on the other side, exactly where the two witnesses described this Sasquatch being on Sunday, last Sunday. And I was out there this Thursday. Unfortunately, it had rained heavily in between there. So most of the evidence and footprints and potential hairs and stuff are just wiped away. But it's an area I think that they kind of go every once in a while. They're not living there full time. The river, that creek is kind of polluted with trash and stuff, unfortunately. But it's an area where historically they've been sighting. It's a lot of private property. You can only get in there if you're fishing with a license to fish. Otherwise, it's trespassing. So typically not a lot of people are going on there. There's a one trail system that kind of, it's not really a trail system. It's a trail that people have used over a while to go fishing. No one goes off trail. Very swampy, mud, muck, up to your knees at least in some spots. So a lot of people aren't going into the marsh and swamp where this creature was supposedly at. Apparently there was two of them because they heard something while they were in the marsh shaking trees. They felt it was bedded down, which I did actually walk and find some bedding areas in the cactus like they described. And the tree, I'm guessing where it was shaking and stuff. And then the second individual was in a tree. They jumped out of the tree, seen them, they seen it, and then it ran up the embankment. So there was actually two of them there. And I found the footprints, at least, of the one that jumped out of the tree and went up the trail, the railroad embankment. But it's in a place where if you ask the people in town, they would laugh and say, there's no way a Bigfoot's living right there. But
I've had several interviews where people talk about, that they're right in town, they're dumpster diving and, looking for food there.
yeah.
And somehow, they escape most people, but a few people have seen them.
Well, yeah, a lot of people just, it's off their radar. They're not expecting this creature to, be right over there. And so they don't really even look. Why would they look for something that doesn't exist in their own mindset? So,
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Well, tell us once again, how can everyone find your YouTube channel and see and hear all of these things that you're telling us about?
yes, you can go to the Lost Cryptids Conservatory YouTube channel where you can find a lot of our evidence and different live shows and discussions and stuff. The Facebook page, same name, and we also have a Facebook group. And if you watch the last couple videos, I posted the evidence of the Monroe footprints and stuff that we just talked about. Also did a live show explaining more details of the area and what I thought. And in the descriptions of those are the link to our Bigfoot conference that we're having. It's called the Michigan Bigfoot and Dogman Conference because I have seen a dogman. I know we didn't get into it today, but it's a free event. Donations are welcomed, but it's a free event September 26th from noon to 6. And then we're going to be doing a little camp out in some of these Squatch hotspots that we like to go. And so that's kind of an invitation. You kind of have to contact us and kind of a thing that's not free and open to the public, because we need some professional mindset people when you're taking people out in the woods and potentially be a Sasquatch next to us. We don't want people pooping their pants or running off and wigging out. And so, but that's about it. Yeah, that's how you can contact us. And we plan on having lots of fun and hopefully, capturing something that actually happens.
Exactly. Well, Blake, I really do thank you for jumping on today and doing the interview for us. You have so much rich experience out there in the woods, and it sounds like you have a good team as well as some other people coming on board at times. So good luck with your conference. I hope that goes really well for you.
Oh, thank you. And I appreciate you having me on. We had a lot of fun.
Yeah, exactly. I love these stories. They're interesting and intriguing. I'm going to let you go now, and I want to invite everyone to please, please, please like, share, and subscribe. Let's keep this channel going.